Hello and welcome back to the channel. I've got some books in front of me which I picked up the end of the summer actually. I went to Boscastle and I went to the Museum of Witchcraft, and it's a thoroughly entertaining museum, educational and a curiosity, and for anybody willing to make their first steps into witchcraft, it's a good place to start. It's a good place, you know, if you're already a practicing witch, almost like a pilgrimage type of place. And for somebody that just has, you know, a curiosity on the subject, and it's a good, it's an entertaining and it's good value for money to go there. So when we went in, we thoroughly, you know, enjoyed, like I said, our look around and familiarized ourselves with the actual artifacts on display. I've been there twice before, and on each occasion there was a skeleton on display of a local witch, Joan White. I believe that's how you pronounce her name, also known as the Fighting Fairy of Bodmin. Now, that skeleton, I did come across an article online, like you do, stating that it was no longer on display and that it had, or she'd had a burial. So that sparked my curiosity to go there to see if the museum still held its allure, because it was the presence of the witch's skeleton, or Joan's skeleton, which added a kind of draw factor to the museum, and I kind of wanted to go and see whether it still held that allure and curiosity factor for somebody who is not a practicing witch to go there and see what the museum had to offer without it. And I am pleased to say, you know, it didn't disappoint. It still has that air, and it's everything that you'd want from a museum of witchcraft. So it wasn't a loss for Joan's remains to have a proper burial. So you know, thankfully the museum still has a draw factor. So I've had books from when I was at secondary school right the way through to the present day on the subject of witchcraft. But, you know, moving house multiple times, throw into that a divorce, and the chaoticness of life itself, books I've had for a long time have disappeared into the ether, quite literally, and I can no longer put my hands on them. So I was quite keen to actually go and pick up some literature, but I wanted literature that was kind of interest to me and what I was trying to look for. Bearing in mind my channel, I'm out hiking the ancient footpaths that would have linked parishes, homesteads, churches, workplaces, and some of them are quite lonely footpaths through, like, you know, deep valleys, the high moorlands, and you can still feel an air of people who travelled on those footpaths. And if you let your imagination just drift away, you can almost visualise them. And that will then lead you to the stories that you can read about people coming across on the lonely, dark footpaths. Figures of witches that asked for assistance, asked for, you know, some financial help, or just literally were just asked for, you know, people to give them a hand, or you know, any material items that they may have required. And there was always the stories of people that you know, who did not offer any of those items, and obviously they suffered the consequences from the witch's wrath. And you know, those stories are quite commonplace about witches, so I've always got that in the back of my mind. And like I've always said, if I was to come across a old lady, hunched over old lady of the traditional witch type, and she wanted coin or wanted assistance, I would be sure to give it after reading and listening about some of the stories of witchcraft and witches on the old lonely footpaths. Right then, so to dive straight into it, once we'd finished walking around the museum, we talked to the lady at the kiosk, who was very helpful, and she was able to point us into the direction of a book that would be of value to myself. And not only that, a book my wife had already known about, and she was requesting if they had it. And then on top of that, another book which might just give me that sense from where I was looking at witchcraft from, like being out on the footpaths, the very old traditional witches and encounters that you would have had, to the modern era. But to start things off, I'll just show you the book my wife knew about and wanted, and they did have it in stock, and I'll let you have a look. So basically, this is the book that my wife knew about, and it's Spells from a Wise Woman's Cottage by Steve Patterson. Now, I haven't read this book, and I'm not going to do a review. All I'm going to say is it's well known enough for my wife to have heard about it and want a copy to read herself. She's still to complete it. Once she's completed, I'll read it. But I'm looking forward to getting into this one. But yeah, this was on stock there. They held it. And from what I can gather, it's quite a well-renowned book. But yeah, so that's one I'm looking forward to getting into. But the book that I'm going to discuss the most is this one here. And it's Traditional Witchcraft, a Cornish Book of Ways. Now, this book here was just what I was after. Not only is it based in and around Cornwall with references to other parts of the British Isles, because obviously ideas and practices are fluent and they'll flow from both Cornwall upwards and ideas will come down, but it basically does focus on pretty much the aspects of witchcraft down here, and it is just what I wanted, because it takes you into the world pretty much of what I can describe as folk witchcraft, and it gave me everything I wanted from a book. So instantly, just looking at the cover, it's going to draw you straight in, and the author is Gemma Gary, and it's by Troy Books. Now, it's been expertly written in a manner which doesn't overload you with too much of the technical and fine details which a full practicing witch may want or require, that somebody like myself with just a passing interest and just wants that next step up to gain an interest or an insight into witchcraft, that you'll be so overloaded that you may just get so bogged down that you put the book down. This will actually keep you drawn in and wanting more information. And the opening bit where she's describing going through a dark woodland to a meet-up, and you know, she describes the air, the atmosphere. It's everything I feel when I'm out on those footpaths at night, when I've miscalculated my walks, my ability and speed at my age to do a complete circular, and as I'm coming back through those footpaths, through the woodlands, the valleys, and it's getting dim and then going into twilight, then going into darkness, it made me feel everything that I feel on occasion on those footpaths. It drew me in from those first few paragraphs. So it also, as a stick maker, it discusses witches' tools. It discusses everything, you know. I can't rate it enough. And for me, it's made me also realise what I'm seeing on YouTube, where modern day witches are discussing their witchcraft and things like that, which I kind of possibly would have dismissed. She assures the reader that witchcraft, from what I traditionally think of as witchcraft has had to evolve, and this is in a possible way how it's evolving. And what you may see if you looking on YouTube for witchcraft, the subject of witchcraft, and you click on some videos and you see nice new apartments all in you know, a kind of semi-rural aesthetic attire, you know, trying to create the ambience, where I can remember some of my old school friends who were farmers and in the rural communities, going to their houses and cottages. They were really just as you would probably imagine an old poor spinster you know, witch or wise woman of the village, it would be like. And it's nothing like what I see on TV or on YouTube, shall I say, of the practicing witches. But I don't suppose it could have stayed that way. And those sort of like cottages are hard to find anyway. And you would not expect people to live in that sort of poverty, if I can use that word, or slightly non-traditional way of life now. I mean, standards of people's living standards have risen, and obviously I suppose this is a new incarnation of witchcraft, and you wouldn't want or expect people just to live like that, just to call themselves a witch. So this book, even though I was a slight doubter, like I said, to what I'm seeing on YouTube from modern witches, so to speak, it's kind of assured me that they are, and they're just a new incarnation of witchcraft. But yeah, fantastic book. If you've got any sense of wanting to understand witchcraft just above curiosity, this will do it, and it will take you to that place. And on top of that, because it's so heavily influenced and bound to Cornwall, obviously me living here in North Cornwall, I subscribe to everything in this book. But it's still relevant to people within the UK and even people further afield in other parts of the world where witchcraft may have been in the sense that this book is offering, may have been transported to other places and then adapted and made their own in other parts of the world or other, you know, locations. So yeah, fantastic book. I can't rate this book enough. So moving on from that one, the lady also suggested to me that I might want to read this one. This is A Village Witch, Life as a Village Wise Woman in the Wilds of West Cornwall. Now, I'll let you read the author there. I haven't read this one. I've just had a very quick thumb through, and I can tell this is going to be an interesting book because it also, yet again, challenges a little bit of what I believe is witch or is a witch or witchcraft in general. It actually states this, you know, that, well, actually on the back it says at the present the market is flooded with how to do books on witchcraft and associated themes. So I'm guessing she's trying to step away from the flair and the modernization of witchcraft and just hold true to a little bit of the past, but marry it into what witchcraft has to morph into to actually move through time and stay relevant to people who practice witchcraft. So I'm looking forward to this book, but like I said, I can't do a review because obviously I've yet to get to it. I keep coming back to this book, but by God, you know, I'm not a witch. I'm not a practicing witch. Will never be a practicing witch, but I have the utmost respect for people who do practice it and due, you know, to what I know and I've read before. But reading this book, it has sharpened my senses. But yeah, the one book I would like to say, it's not a book, it's a pamphlet from the actual Museum of Witchcraft in Boscastle. And it's a thoroughly detailed little pamphlet. As you walk through the museum, you may feel like you've taken everything on board and, you know, walk out the door. But I strongly suggest you get this booklet on leaving, because every item there, and it lists them all, is covered there, and it's something to take away with you, just to sharpen the mind when you think back on the subject. Obviously, from if you're a practicing witch or looking to get into it, you might want something a bit more in depth. But for somebody that's just going in from the curiosity point of view, this absolutely is something that you can put on your bookshelf and just come back to, just to remind yourself. And it discusses everything from the actual history of the museum, which is quite important, and the main characters who've made a play in the story of it. Images of witchcraft, you know, how you know, I suppose how we traditionally think of witches. And yeah, fantastic little pamphlet. You have to get this on leaving, because it will allow you, if you never go back, just to sharpen your mind and remember your visit to the museum. It also, you know, gives you a little look into the wise woman's cottage, and basically all aspects what that museum holds. And yeah, I'm thoroughly I can't recommend it enough. And the pictures inside of it are detailed enough for you to actually be able to still visualize it, even if you haven't been back to it for several years. So yeah, I would definitely recommend you get a copy of this on leaving the museum. Well, that's pretty much what I wanted to talk about regarding this particular subject at this particular moment. I do have a little pilgrimage I'm going to make regarding witchcraft, but I'll do that when the weather's fine, better, and I'll discuss that with you guys then. But just a little story about this book which made me smile is that I was told that some of the old stone sties on footpaths in hedges are places where, if you go at certain times, you can actually, and under certain conditions, you can actually meet or you can interact with spirits from the spirit world, the little people which can move from one world to another, and you know, pixies, knockers, spriggans, spirits, the undead, which use the footpaths to navigate their way through the living world. When they come to those stone sties, if you sit there, you can actually engage with these entities and you know, question them, talk to them, you know, glean information from them while they go on their way. So it's quite amusing to me, because I did obviously read that a long time ago, forgotten about it, and as I read that in the book, it really brought it all back, and I use those stone sties to this day, and it's just made me chuckle, thinking, is there perhaps a time I could go back to one of those sties, wait there and see if I could converse with the other world. But yeah, that could be quite interesting to do at some point. But yeah, this is Andy from Folklore Hiking Sticks. I'm just going to wrap this up, and take care, stay safe, and I hope to catch you guys out on the trail.